What's up, Cubs fans? Listen, I got a good one for you guys today. You don't want to miss out. We're going to be talking all things Alex Bregman and Shota Imanaga accepting his qualifying offer, as well as the latest news on Kyle Tucker and how the Cubs' chances really just did dash into thin air. Let's talk about it and then some. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Chicago Cubs Central, your number one spot for all things Chicago Cubs. I'm your host, Mike Jones. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Thanks so much for all the support, all the love, all the comments, all that you guys have been doing since we started doing these episodes. Listen, I appreciate it all, guys. It means the world to me. You guys do not even know. But yes, guys, the Chicago Cubs do have news. It broke earlier today that Shota Imanaga was going to opt in or accept his qualifying offer for $22.025 million. It's for 1 year. It's a 1-year deal. And it is apparent to all of us that the Chicago Cubs did want to keep Shota, but more importantly, Shota probably realized that he wanted to stay in Chicago. He did not want to go out anywhere else. I think that there is a case of realizing that the grass ain't always greener on the other side. You know, Shota, like I said, at first there was rumors coming out that him and his camp wanted to kind of venture out and see what other deals might be out there. I think he realized very quickly that with the season that he had last year, that the deals just weren't there for him like they might have been in the past. So with that being said, Shota Imanaga did decide to opt into his contract with the Chicago, opt into his contract. I don't know why I keep saying that. He did not opt into his contract, but he did agree to the qualifying offer. So he will be with the Chicago Cubs in 2026. Now, again, there is still a chance that he opted into this deal or accepted this deal, and the Chicago Cubs still could look to move him maybe as a trade asset. I mean, it's a 1-year deal. There's a lot of different scenarios. John Heyman actually pointed out a couple of them. One scenario is that the Chicago Cubs did get him to sign this deal, but he could also be traded to another team. This also could have just signed him to a 1-year deal as a prove-it deal. They also could have signed him to this deal just based off the fact that maybe it's an opportunity for him to go back and pitch in Japan in 2027 if he is not under contract with any MLB team. So should the Chicago Cubs and the rest of the MLB go into a lockout, you could very well see Imanaga go back to Japan and pitch there. So again, it just kind of makes sense that these type of deals would happen. Now, with that being said, again, Shota Imanaga is somebody that throughout his career has been something that the Chicago Cubs could depend on, especially that 2024 season. 2025, I think, is why a lot of teams were out on Shota and not forking in the dough. If Shota Imanaga had shown throughout the 2025 season that A, he wasn't injury prone, and B, that he could keep up the same success that he had in 2024, I think that the Cubs would have opted into that deal and not let Shota go. But again, like I said, it was one of those things where Jed Hoyer even mentioned in his interviews that he just didn't feel that that deal was fair on the Cubs side, the 3-year deal, the opting in for 3 more years. And Shota didn't feel that the deal that they gave him for the 2 more years, the 1-and-1 deal, was good for him. So, like I said, both sides could not agree on that. So it ended up being something where Shota was set to potentially test free agency, but the Chicago Cubs had one more thing to do, which was offer him a qualifying offer. And with that qualifying offer, Shota did, I guess, send feelers out. And then based off of that, he decided to accept the qualifying offer from the Chicago Cubs. Again, I hope Shota is able to go and fix some of the issues that he had with his pitches in 2025. Shota Imanaga is a very, very good pitcher. I do want to preface that, but Shota Imanaga is also 32 years old. Shota Imanaga also is, no rookie, no youngster. He is a seasoned veteran when it comes to pitching, and he is somebody that you look at with the Chicago Cubs and you say, man, as great as he was, 2024, 2025 left a lot to be desired, especially in the postseason. So you look at this and you say to yourself, what can the Chicago Cubs do with him? Like I said, and it's one of those things, like I told you, they could trade him, absolutely, but they also could turn around and they could keep him and just see what he does and leave him on a prove it deal. And that's honestly what I think is more than likely going to happen. I think Shota Imanaga is on a prove it 1 year deal with this team. If he does come back out there and he goes back to showing you who he was, well, then, I mean, hey, then like I said, the Chicago Cubs are willing to go back to the table and negotiate with Shota. The Chicago Cubs do love Shota Imanaga. Let's be clear. This isn't one of those situations where, like I said, the Chicago Cubs wanted Shota Imanaga gone. They just wanted to get him at the right deal, right price. So 25 for one season of Shota Imanaga is not a bad deal. Not a bad deal for Shota, not a bad deal for the Cubs. So again, we will see what he is able to do from there. But like I said, it's one of those situations where we just have to see what happens. This deal, like I told you guys, him accepting his qualifying offer was going to be a huge portion of what happened in free agency, because that 22 million now takes the Chicago Cubs reportedly down to 165 million dollars left to spend essentially in this offseason. So the Chicago Cubs do have money to spend, but that is not a large lump sum of money to spend. You figure in, if the Chicago Cubs go and get a player that they go and get a star player that they're going to pay somewhere upwards of 40 to 60 million dollars for a year, it only leaves you $100 million, and you got to fill, about 12 roster spots after the call-ups from today. So that, like I said, that's a lot to have to fill in a short amount of time. So the Chicago Cubs do have a lot they have to figure out. But Shota does present himself as an opportunity too. So Shota Imanaga, it gives the Chicago Cubs flexibility. And like I said, if he struggles, then like I said, it's not really that much of a risky deal, because Shota Imanaga is only signed to the Chicago Cubs for one season. So again, like I said, it just came off, like I said, he had a rough year in 2025, but we're hoping that he's able to turn things around in 2026 for the Chicago Cubs. But this directly plays into our next topic and subject. But first, before we get to that, I need you guys to comment below. Are you excited that Shota Imanaga is staying with the Cubs, or did you wish that the Chicago Cubs would have went ahead and let him go somewhere else and be a free agent and put that money towards some other piece, some other pitching piece? So now you have a rotation of Cade Horton, Jameson Taillon, of Shota Imanaga and Matthew Boyd, and now you need a fifth starter. So again, like I said, the Chicago Cubs, as of right now, are still in searching for that pitching fifth starter. So we'll see what they do with that. We also want to talk about Kyle Tucker, because the Chicago Cubs did apparently offer that same qualifying offer to Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker declined that qualifying offer as widely expected, which was widely expected, which means the Cubs will receive a draft pick compensation if Kyle Tucker does sign elsewhere. So Kyle Tucker is reportedly headed into free agency, and he is in demand and will demand a long, costly deal. So the Chicago Cubs do have to look at other alternatives as far as what they're going to do. Now, before I get to those alternatives, I do also want to note that the big story coming out today about Kyle Tucker was that now the Toronto Blue Jays are at the forefront of potentially who Kyle Tucker could sign with. Kyle Tucker is reportedly looking for anywhere between $300 to $400 million contract for 10 years. He wants to be locked down in one place, does not want to move him and his family. And it looks like Toronto is at the forefront of getting that deal done. They also have Vladdy over there as well, as they have Springer and some really good pitching too. So, I mean, again, this could very well be what Kyle Tucker needs, and where he ends up landing at a place like that where there's consistency. He knows where he's going to be and where he'll play on the majority of the rest of his career. Again, more power to him. like I said, if he does end up getting that big long-term $300 million deal, I just don't think with his injury history that a lot of teams are willing to do that now for Kyle Tucker. Again, like I said, he had one really, really great season with Houston. He had an okay season with the Cubs last year, but like I said, it wasn't anything to write home about. But apparently teams are going to be clamoring to get Kyle Tucker. So, like I said, more power to him, more power to his team. That, like I said, that he does sign with. Hopefully Tucker can stay healthy and produce. But there is no guarantee there when the MLB, and especially with somebody that has an injury history like his. So, again, you have to be very, very, very careful when you're striking deals like that, again, because that's committing your team and a lot of funds to one player that may not be able to stay healthy. I mean, look at all that Bryce Harper has sent Philadelphia through. I mean, like I said, they committed to him, but I mean, he is yet to play a full season without being injury prone. So, like I said, I mean, it's just one of those things, but more power to him, more power to Kyle Tucker. So, but the Chicago Cubs then do have to look at alternatives, and alternatives. The big story coming out of the Chicago Cubs camp today outside of Shota Imanaga was that the Chicago Cubs are basically all in on trying to sign Alex Bregman. That's right. The guy that we fumbled a year ago was in negotiations with, wanted to be a Cub, probably could have led us at least to the National League Championship along with Kyle Tucker last season. But instead, was unable to. The Chicago Cubs were unwilling to meet where Bregman wanted the deal to be, and unfortunately, they missed out on him, and he ended up going to Boston. So after a season in Boston, Alex Bregman has decided to once again test free agency and see what type of deal he can get. So Bregman is believed to be viewed as a fit and a great piece for the Chicago Cubs. And like I said, the Chicago Cubs are expected to be all in on Alex Bregman. In 2025, Alex Bregman hit 273, 360, and 462 for a slash line with 18 home runs, 62 RBIs, and a .821 OPS. So again, like I said, not the most flashiest home run numbers. You like that slash line, though. That's a great slash line for him. But you also would like to see that home run total go up. So he's a strong defender at third base. He's a veteran presence. He is 32 years old, and he does have some recent injuries. So again, that kind of leads you to wonder what the Chicago Cubs would do with him. Would they put Seiya Suzuki in right field, have Matt Shaw still play third base, and just have Bregman DH, or would they trade off DHing spots and have sometimes, other people DH for the Chicago Cubs? I think bringing somebody like Bregman into the clubhouse shows Chicago Cubs fans that they are serious about trying to compete this year, and they're not just, pretenders, or they're not just trying to wait on the young talent to get it together. It's that they are serious about the Chicago Cubs being players in the 2026 season. So again, like I said, it's one of those situations where this could all be for naught if the Chicago Cubs are unwilling to spend the money to sign Alex Bregman. Again, it could cost them somewhere between 5 to 8 years, and like I said, somewhere between 120 to 160 million dollars for a player like Alex Bregman. But again, the Chicago Cubs have the money, they have the resources, they have the funds. It's all about if they want to do it or not. Well, I need to hear from you guys. Would you want the Chicago Cubs to sign Alex Bregman? Do you think that it's a good idea, given his injury history and given all that he's been through, that the Chicago Cubs should sign him now? Or do you just keep rolling with Matt Shaw and try to spend that money elsewhere on hitting? And if you do want to spend it elsewhere, who do you want to spend it on? Thanks, guys, so much for your time. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you all so much. Until next time, go Cubs, go. Peace.
Thank you for watching another episode of Chicago Cubs Central, the #1 spot for all Chicago Cubs content. Remember to like, share, subscribe for more Cubs content.